Live yet? Hey guys, and welcome to the All Black Podcast. Yo, it's absolutely mad. Sorry guys, I thought I went live and I didn't go live, and so the countdown went down and I wasn't even on. But listen, guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. We are giving you guys an exclusive men's panel live. This is where we get to discuss about men's issues, things that we're going through, things that we're seeing, things that are happening to us. This is the men's free space, safe space where you guys can come and have your say. But today's topic we're talking about is men's lack of identity and leadership in 2022 is hampering our boys. So in 2022, it seems like, or it could be said, that the young men of this day and age, this generation, are suffering from leadership issues and a lack of identity. And so I'm discussing this issue with Black and also Sean Davis as well. So we're gonna get in some good conversation today. But if you're new to the channel, do me a massive favor: like it, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of the what up lows. We appreciate you guys as well. I'm sure the ladies are gonna love this conversation and they'll have plenty to say for us today. But let's get into this conversation. I don't waste much time because time is against us. But I want to ask this question. So, do you agree with the statement that there's a lack of identity and leadership in 2022? This modern day era, Gen Z, they would say, is there a lack of identity and leadership from your perspective? If there is, please describe what you're seeing in this current crop and this current time as well. Corey, since you're in green and looking like a Power Ranger ready to go, I'm gonna let you take us off.
Change my name to Green Ranger. But yeah, I do think that there is a lack of an understanding of what leadership really is. In my personal opinion, I think that a lot of guys, when it comes to leadership role, there is different definitions. It's not something that everyone is understanding around the globe, or at least within the community. So I think that there has to be a conversation had so everyone has a clear understanding of what leadership looks like. It's not a dictatorship. It's not barking orders at people and saying that they should do what you want them to do, regardless. So I think a clear understanding of that is what we need. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you very much, Sean. How about yourself? Do you agree with the statement? Agree, disagree with the statement at hand?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that you have so many factions that are out there. I think we need more of, not to say that we all need to think exactly the same way, but there needs to be kind of like a collective where you might get people from the manosphere together and then folks that are, maybe on the other end. And then you got, well, what do they call the purple pill? And then, folks similar to us who might be somewhere in the middle, right? That can kind of come together and just do more with our young men as they're growing up so that, because there's no rules anymore. You see elderly women getting abused. You see, just whereas there were some rules that used to exist, I don't think they exist anymore. It's almost like a free for all. And it's not to say that things were perfect, but I think that there was definitely an understanding. And now that we don't have that. We don't. I think what being a man has changed and evolved so much that some of it's gotten watered down, and then other parts of it are getting propped up, which really aren't what being a man is about.
Love that. Thank you very much for those boys. I definitely hear what you guys are saying as well. And I think there's not a lack of leadership in this generation. I think there is a lot of leadership. I think that's the issue. I think there's so many different types of leadership out there in terms of what people are doing. That's where we're getting the mayhem. Because if we look at the definition of leadership from just a Google, it says the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Well, if you have Little Baby, you have Jay-Z, you have Mayweather, if you have, Tom Brady, whatever you want to call it, whoever's playing, I'm saying sports, music, you're talking about finance, you're talking about all these different areas of life. They are leaders in those spaces because there are different types of leadership. So I think there is plenty of leadership around. I think it's just the type of leadership is the issue in terms of what's the collective, like you said, coming to blue pill, whatever pill it is, what's the collective mass saying about what is the correct type of leadership in terms of how to steer the young generation in the right form or fashion. And I think that's where we're kind of suffering, because we're always going to take inspiration from somewhere, and we're all going to have our leaders in some shape or form. In fact, let me ask you boys this question, which is, who do you look up for inspiration? Who would you say, if, or when you were younger, who did you look up to for inspiration? Who was your inspiration? I would ask that question. Yeah, Corey, who's your inspiration when you was younger?
Yeah, so I grew up with three brothers, three older
Cool.
brothers. So I was the youngest. So I had a lot of different aspects to choose from, And I think there's a benefit to having multiple people that you can go and turn to and get that feedback from, and understanding what it is to be like a man, or what it understands to be in a leadership role. And what I did learn is that, it really starts off with respect. Because most leaders, well, all leaders want respect, and you got to understand that in order to give respect, you must first give it. So when you understand that, and then you're able to have effective leadership, or effective thinking, or process, critical thinking. If you can master that, that can hone you into being an effective leader, because you do have to make decisions with logic, with understanding, sometimes quick decisions. If you have that, then you're putting yourself in a better position. But it's always good to have that outside view of what man, or what leadership is, and so you can see it for yourself. Is how it works. Because it's one thing to be told what a leader does, but when you have someone that shows you the example. Because we all learn differently. Some of us learn by just hearing, some of us learn by seeing. But when you can see the actions behind the words, that's what makes it more impactful. That's what makes it more like, okay, wow, that person listened when you said X, Y, and Z. Why are they listening to you? Why do they trust you? And then they can break it down to you, understand. I think those conversations need to happen more and more often. Not even necessarily from man to child. Sometimes just man to man, to be honest with you, because we're at that point right now where we need that.
Thank you very much, Corey. Appreciate it. Sean, same question to you.
So for me, a little different than Corey, because I'm an only child. And then I lost my dad when I was 16. So up until 16, I would say he was probably my primary role model. And then I had a very close relationship with my mother's father, who, has been part of my life. And I spent a significant amount of time with, from the time I was born. So he played a very big role in my life. And then I also had a stepdad like figure, that was in my life as well. So I think I was able to pull from primarily those three men. And then, as time and I grew and I developed my own identity, I, studied, and people that I grew up learning about in history. So I would, whether it was Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, or people historically that were leaders in our communities, that I would take aspects of things that I felt were valuable from them.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And just like yourself as well. I mean, my inspiration, I guess, started off with father figure, because that's the first one you kind of see. So a lot of sound bites, wisdom, a lot of the way that I view and perceive the world is coming from that particular angle. And then obviously, and it's interesting because I think, and we'll probably want to divert the conversation slightly as well. The strength of that identity being implanted in you in a young age, for us as men, I believe is so critical. I think I've said this before. I remember one day I was out and about, and in my area, a couple of gangs and that they do their thing, they do their thing. But I remember them asking me to join, and I said, "Ah." I said, I know you ain't asking me to join. I'm sorry, but if you knew what my mom and dad could do to me, yeah, you know what you lot can do, they can do 10 times worse. I said, I could be on a ship with a crate of Ribena and be out of it in a second. You guys don't play, so I'm not going to be about it. I already had a good unit of a family first and foremost, but two, also I had that strong I would say leadership and identity in terms of this is what we do. This is a culture that we create in our own house, and this is the rules that you abide by. This is how we expect you to behave. Now, of course, you try to you bend and you try to do what boys do, but that was my first thought when it came to my house. I said, yeah, this ain't gonna run in my household. When they asked me to smoke, I said, this ain't gonna run in my household. Like, yo, like a lot of things that I dodged were because of what identity and the leadership that I had seen from my father figure already was embedded in me. So at that point, I was able to make certain decisions based upon the wisdom that had been implanted in me by or might one say, the head of the home. You know what I mean? And that informed and gave me time to kind of look at the world in a way where I could still be able to make decisions, but I had that influence. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense for you guys.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, because I think everybody's path is a little different, obviously depending on how you grow up, how your parents, you know, interact with you, what they prioritize. I think that's going to shift your worldview. And, a lot of times parents, especially certain generations, instilled quite a bit of fear in us, right? And I think it was because it was the best way they knew how to keep us out of harm's way.
Yeah.
I can think about, and I say this to say, like, some people like just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't think it's to say that there's no value in some of the things that previous generations did, because there definitely is. And I think we all can arrive at a certain point by different ways of rearing your children, because every child is different and needs something different. Because I could think about my experience, which was very different. And I mean, I'm fortunate in that my father did a really good job of being communicative very early. So he was very open and vocal about mistakes that he had made, things that he had done. But the caveat to that was, you don't get to do it, right? So I'm going to be transparent with you. I'm going to share with you some mistakes that I made along the way, but it's so you don't do it. And I mean, those lessons sat with me till this day, which is why I never, like, it's not no disrespect to anybody else, but for me, it was like, I wasn't smoking weed. I wasn't doing anything. So if I could see it going on around me, it was of no interest to me, because I knew enough from him sharing and talking to me about how things start and what the potential progression could be. I was like, I don't even need to entertain that, right? And even when it came down to drinking, I waited till much, much later in life to drink. Whereas, I had friends that were drinking in their early to mid to late, mid-teens, So I think we need to choose what we're going to do. But I think men should be actively involved in their sons' lives, especially talking about what manhood is, what they learned, what are some open and honest mistakes that they made, so that there is a baseline, right? Because sometimes when those conversations don't happen, we just dismiss everything our parents say once we get to a certain age. So I think we got to have those conversations. We have to provide also positive examples of what male leadership looks like, right? It can't just be heavy-handed. There has to be a balance. There needs to be communication. There needs to be love. And I'll land my point here. I think another thing that I learned from my dad was love, because he always told me that the one thing that kind of made him lash out as an older teenager was the fact that he didn't feel loved by his dad, right? He never felt that warmness or anything like that. And he wanted to make sure that he didn't duplicate that with me. So he was very vocal about telling me he loved me. He gave me hugs. He was not big on spankings. He probably hit me one time in my life, and I was a teenager. And looking back, I deserve to be, in my chest, So, but I think like that helped to shape me and my vision of what it's like to be a man, where some men struggle with that. I didn't have that. I had a dad that loved me and told me he loved me all the time, where some people don't get that and they wish they had that, and it leaves them in a position of not knowing themselves or not knowing what that feels like.
Love that.
Yeah. I get what you're saying on that too, Sean, and Kojo. For me, I think it does boil down to, different people have different people in their lives for a reason. For me, my father passed away when I was at a very early age. I was 5 years old. So because of those type of circumstances, I did have my brothers to fall back on, and I'm appreciative of that, because out of the three of them, there was something different that I learned from each one of them, so and that's something I can always keep with me for the rest of my life. Now, what I do know about my dad was this: that I didn't know that he was a no nonsense type of guy, pretty much like myself. And sometimes, the essence of who your parents are, or even your environment, it sticks with you. Like people say, you're a product of your environment. So people out here, if they're in gangs or have a life of crime, is because they grew up around a certain type of element, which is that's all they knew. No kid goes out and seeks danger. No kid goes out and seeks how to get in trouble. It's just what you're around. So I think that you have to use the people who are around you to become better people, whether it is parents, whether it's siblings, whether it's, people that you really can honestly trust with information. But like what Sean is saying, when you're a kid, sometimes we don't have that wherewithal within us to know what to look at as positive or negative. So for us to look at a man or an uncle, brother, anyone, we don't know what it's like until we actually see them in action and get that feedback from how they are in their day to day. When we see that, okay, that person was left smiling, that's something we can identify with. If someone is happy, someone is smiling, someone is appreciative, we can identify with that as kids. So when we see that, we say, okay, something here was done right because that person is smiling now, So I think it's important for us, if kids don't have the access to men who can teach them how to be effective leaders, teach them about being a man, then there should be someone at some point in life, even if it takes to get into adulthood. At some point, you have to seek that out. Just to verify that you're doing it right. So yeah, that's my 2 pence.
I love that as well. And I think, quintessentially what you just said there as well is really powerful, because you were talking about how, okay, your father wasn't around, but his essence, you're carrying that. And I think this is also a part of the weight and the gravity of becoming a parent.
All right, so I think what he was saying is that about the essence of, people around us, Sean. So I don't know where exactly he was going. Nope, so I can't hear you.
Still, you don't hear me?
There you go. Go
Okay,
Now
yeah.
we do.
No. What I was gonna say was, obviously, like, hey David, I was gonna say, like, I think that it shows the response. What we just described just shows the responsibility, first and foremost, of character. So outside of even behavior, before you see anything, by what even Corey just shared, is character. So you can tap in, because something beyond even the physical realms of the person being present, their character somehow passes through to the children, right? So even before you think about behavior and being present, what is your character like? Because clearly the children are taking that on. And actually we see that with when you ask someone, if you say the person doesn't know their parent or doesn't know their father figure, and yet the mother will be like, you act just like your father. How? You ain't even seen a dad. Something about that, the essence and the character of the individual person has been transferred to that child. So that just makes it even more important about us as individuals, men, in terms of us holding a particular character, because that even speaks before we even physically enter a space, if we're talking about our children, but even people that we know. So that's I want to say, that first part. I think the second part also, if we're talking about this identity and leadership as well in 2022, and of course going back to us as young men, we were trying to figure out our identity. You know, we were trying to figure out where we stood, who we were, what we're about, right? That definition of identity just says the fact of being who or what a person or a thing is. How do you identify, or what do you identify with? And this is why, quintessentially, I think our generations beneath us are suffering more and more. I know, Corey, to gonna go there. I know generations are had to go. You know, it takes. It's important that we have those figures that are able to speak, to kind of guide and direct us. You know what I mean? So I think this generation, what they're lacking is a voice. You know, that's why Kevin Samuels was so powerful in this generation. They needed a voice and they got one. Now, what does that voice say? Because that's what's gonna start guiding a lot of these people who are aimless, who seemingly are needing that guidance, who need that direction, who are in need of that leadership, and that leadership is going to cultivate people that are similar to them. So whatever that leader is saying, he's cultivating followers who are going to be like him or her. So in this particular case, obviously him. So I think the importance here in this is also, in our current crop, what voices are these young people hearing? Because I know what I was hearing when I was younger. You know what I mean? I had to fight what was in the world versus what I was hearing at home. And because what I heard at home was so strong, when I got out there, yes, I might have faltered a little bit, but that training inevitably brought me back to square one. You know, I don't know if that kind of makes sense as well in that essence.
Yeah, I think we all go through, a transition when we got to find our own way. In addition, I got to give credit to my mother, because my parents split up and divorced probably when I was like four-ish, somewhere between 4 and 5. Um, but she was very key on not speaking ill of my father in any way. They showed generally good communication between the two of them when it came to things that they had to, when it came to me. If there was an event at school, they were both present, right? They both had moved on and had other relationships. And they were able, to really comfortably navigate through that. Not perfect, but that's not reality, right? But they were able to work together in enough fashion. And I think, as much as this is about men, I think also when a relationship fails, it's important that the two parents are on the same page and do as much as they can to be a united front. And I could just, I could thank God that my parents were pretty progressive in that mindset to do that as best as they could. And I think that also helped me to be secure, because I think what happens so much in our youth, and we discount it, is because they don't have security, So unfortunately, if there's an instance where the father is not in the home, but they do know him, but there's no security because the relationship between the mother and father is so unstable that they can't get on the same page, right? And then fathers, unfortunately, what happens is, we know that when the father is outside of the home, they're less likely to get parental rights, right? Or it is a tougher process to get those parental rights. And unfortunately, what a lot of men do is they get discouraged, and then they kind of check out, and they don't press forward. And I think that instability impacts their kids, and especially sons, because it's such a balance. And I think, between the fathers and the sons, and we talked about this a lot of times, when it's not a continuum, especially when the fathers are not in the house, right? You don't get to see your father in a big picture. You don't get the ups, the downs. You get those moments when you're with them. And if the moments that you're with them, they're telling you to man up, or they're giving you, nuggets that are going to be good for being a man, but they're not giving you the full spectrum of what leadership and manhood looks like, it causes issues. And then you have your own identity, and then you start filling in the blanks. And then that's where you have so many wayward young men out here, especially, that just kind of take those nuggets of man up. You got to do this, and this is what you need to do. So whether it's how they treat women, whether it's how they feel like they need to go about gaining respect, but if you root cause it, it's because they're unstable and they don't know how to emotionally regulate. They don't know that fighting with your fist doesn't make you a man. Right? Do we need to be able to protect ourselves in the presence of danger? 100%. But that's not what makes you a man, right? It's the wanting and the desire to protect. It is the nature of wanting to take care of and make sure and be forward thinking for your family, right? And the woman that you love, right? That's what makes you a man. It's not getting out there and just seeing a weakness in another man and then trying to pounce on him because he's weak or perceived to be weaker than you. And I think those lessons are not really taught enough. And I'll end here. I think going back to the instability point, it's like because we get so focused on us, right? And I think parents are human, and sometimes we expect them to be superhuman, but they're really not. They're human. They got their own flaws, their own issues, their own walks. But what they forget a lot of times is when they have kids, your kids are not just listening, they're watching. So if your go-to is to fight with their father, if your go-to is to fight with other men, and if your go-to as a father to disappear and to lash out, they're going to in some way, shape, or fashion model that. So we have to do a better job of filling in those gaps, of being more transparent and not trying to be perfect, to really show true leadership.
Bars. I love that, bro. Bars. Yeah, do you know what? It's such a key thing that you're saying there, bro, because I think the missing gap, like you mentioned there as well, is that piece. Like I always say, it's like men are drawn to power naturally. We're drawn to it. And so we do look for powerful people in society. So your first object is that you normally look for the father figure within the home because he has a level of power within, or a level of authority, I should say, within the home. And then once you look outside the home, you look for other people who are authority figures, which is why oftentimes when a home is disruptive, the child can also end up being not always, can end up from the boy side being disruptive in school, because what they have is they've missed the first authority figure within the home. That means now any other authority figure doesn't also get that same respect. And then it goes into the world they live in, right? And so we look for men that have authoritative positions in life, because when we look to emulate, to be like them. So whether it's your father, whether it's a stepdad, whether it's an uncle, whether it's a brother, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a sportsman or whatever, young boys are always looking for someone to emulate, to become, because we are a canvas, we're a sponge, we're trying to soak up to become something. We don't know what we're supposed to become. We're a clean slate. We've come into this world, and we're looking to see how do we navigate the world that we're actually in. And so oftentimes these young boys are listening to, are looking for a voice that will guide them in amongst all the troubles of life. And so, it's so powerful that you mentioned about it, because I think this is actually a big conversation that normally gets, I guess, kind of gets spoken about, but then it gets spoken about in a way that becomes a very big blame game, and I don't want to play that game today. But like you spoke about it in terms of even when it comes to single mother and the father figure. And let's be real, there are some men who just don't want to be a part of that child's life. Them niggas, we don't rock with them. Okay, we don't rock with them. Man, them that don't look after their kids, they're not trying to look after their kids. I can't rock with you. You are causing generational issues. You're a bum to me. It doesn't matter how much money you make. You are causing a lot of trouble, which is why I have a big problem with Nick Cannon. Even though he's looking after these kids financially, you can't be there emotionally for 12 different kids with 12 different baby mothers. It doesn't make sense. but and sometimes that's why I try to push some of my guys that are around me. I'm like, "Look, bro, listen, whatever you got to do what you got to do so you can be there for your daughter or your son. Okay, don't worry about trying to fight the moms. If you need to appease her, nigga. Because let me tell you something, fam. What you get to contribute to that child in that immediate time, bro, it's more valuable than the strike she's giving you right now. And you might not see it right now because at this moment, I get it, your pride, your ego, and I'm with you, bro. It is there. But that kid, if they can get a good amount, because like just listen to what you just said, Sean. You only had your father for 16 years, but their impact is huge. Do you know what I'm saying? And vice versa. So any man out there, I'm saying again because we're talking about identity and leadership. Any man out there who's got the opportunity, to have interaction with a child and you're not with the mother, please have it, because your kids are literally a sponge, especially the boys are literally waiting to have that connection with you so that they can begin to form their identity. Otherwise, someone else's voice is going to be more potent than yours in the early days. And the trouble is, once a kid gets to around about 13, 14, he is going to be trash. It's going to be hard for him to bring it back. It's going to be hard for him to bring it back because at that point, he's had no authority figure. He's been doing what he wants, you know what I mean? And he's still trying to figure out how to emotionally regulate, you know what I mean? And if he's been abandoned, quote unquote, me saying, it's hard for him to look anywhere else but outside of what you're going to give because you're not there or you're not contributing. Um, and so it's important, whatever you can do. If that means going to court, go to court. If that means you have to try and be a bit more negotiative, get someone involved who's a family friend or whatever who knows you both to negotiate. Do whatever you got to do. By all means, just don't give up and say, do you know what? It's not worth it, because that kid is literally waiting to hear your voice. And I'm talking about your leadership, the words of wisdom, things that you're going to say. Like you said, Sean, your dad will tell you certain things. Now, it's not always you're going to always follow it, but you damn well know that if it goes wrong, you're going to come back and be like, yeah, he did tell me still. He was right. So it's important that, that a man especially is involved with his kid's life. It's so powerful because the identity that's formed is huge. So yeah, I can't put that aside enough. And that's a big story of when it comes to identity and leadership in our generation now. We've got a huge problem now. And I'm talking specifically for the Black community, no other race, they can have their own discussion, but we've got a big problem now. Right. And it takes two to tango, by the way. This is not because I was listening earlier on to another conversation, I think it was on the Peace Network. And I was just infuriated by the conversation because it was like, it's so one-sided. So it's like single moms got to do better, they got to choose better, and I'm with them. I do believe that, right? But then my same thing is like, brother, come on. Like, bro, these men, we have to hold them accountable because it affects me and you. So you can't say just choose better. We need to also be involved, you know what I mean, in some way, shape, or form. And that means be a guiding voice. Sometimes I can't be in your life, but I can be a guiding voice. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think um, people have gotten comfortable, and too many men have gotten comfortable with skirting their responsibilities, right? Because just as I mentioned earlier, we do know that there are certain things that just skew in the favor of women, right? Whether it's child support or, paternity and, rights. However, if you do have kids with a woman, you can figure it out. You can figure it out. Will it be some work? But what's better than to, complain and bang your head against the wall and talk about all the laws that are not in your favor, or as a man, show exactly how much you love your children and be persistent, right? I have one of my really, really good friends. He was married, then divorced, and ultimately recently obtained custody of his son. Became not just they had joint custody in the beginning, and then he became the primary custodian.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a long road? Yes, but it was never a question. And I think when you see true leadership, it's never a question. And I think that's what we as men, we have that fortitude inside of us. So we cannot get frustrated by obstacles that may come our way, because what's the risk, right? We risk a relationship with our child. We risk our child not feeling loved. We risk our child going astray. We risk our child being the next person that we clinch when we hear about someone was robbed, mugged, or this or that, right? I'll take the stress of going through anything I need to go through if I had a child to make sure that I was present in their life versus any other outcome. And that's what more of us need to embrace. More of us need to understand that that is what being a man is. Being a man is owning up to your responsibilities. If you made a choice, whether or not you really wanted to have a child or not, but you made a choice to be with that woman and a child is the outcome, you owe it to yourself and that child to be a part of that child's life and for them to know who you are, right? And to be an important part. So I think more of us need to just walk with that attitude and take accountability for ourselves, right? If you know you don't want children, take the proactive measures to make sure you don't have kids. And that's it. Manhood isn't about how many women you sleep with. It's about being responsible with the women that you sleep with and knowing that you have nothing to worry about, right? You don't have nobody lurking on the corner that's going to come at you sideways because you moved in an irresponsible way. It doesn't say mistakes are going to happen, but if they do, then you got to own it. You got to own up to it. I've had a couple of friends who had kids in their early 20s, whether they were in college or just out of college. It wasn't what they planned, but they had to do what they had to do. And I think it's just not being okay with excuses.
Absolutely. Bro, and you know what? You're speaking 100% here. And I think the biggest issue for a lot of men who are in these type of situations, first and foremost, is I think sometimes they don't know how to go about it, right? And this is where, like, I would say, because one of the parts of leadership is problem solving skills. So one of the hardest things about this situation is that I think a lot of guys don't know necessarily the avenues to go, or if they do get to know it, there's a bit of money that's involved, and they're like, is it really worth all the hassle? And I think this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest part. I think this is the biggest part about this, because I think that's the leadership that's required, right? And that in leadership, even of yourself, leadership of yourself, that, hey, do you know what? I'm going to problem solve in this moment, right? Okay. That I want to be involved in my child's life. If she's making it difficult for me, I'm going to find a way. And if that means I have to go legal route, I go down the legal route. And that's the most difficult part, because the legal route it's gonna cost you time, it's gonna cost you money, it's gonna cost you energy. It's gonna be stressful, right? And that's the reality of things. And I think this is where leadership is required, as in a voice that's required, because I think, like me and you will know, like, our fathers have told us certain things about life, that when you encounter it, you hear the voice in your ear when you're encountering a situation. Like, my dad's always said to me, life is hard. I'm gonna let you know, right now it's easy. You're gonna get to adulthood, you're gonna start paying bills. It's hard. And when life hits you, you're like, oh, life is hard. He wasn't playing. Life is difficult. There are things that do happen that come your way. And so all the lessons that are spoken orally, or that you see even from your parents, those things are quintessential in terms of building the leadership model for you when you're going forward. But one of those things is problem solving. So, as a leader, what you're looking for is to solve the issue, right? So, when situations arise and problems arise, how do I go about solving the issue? And I think I remember I was having this conversation with myself about probably like 2-3 years ago. And when I first got laid off, and I was like, bruv, what the heck? I said, how am I getting laid off, bro? That is mad. I've never not had a job since I was 16. Like, I'm now going on 28, and it's like, I've not had a job for 12 years. I don't know how to compute that. Do you know what I mean? I've always found a way to make money. So that next few months, my head is just trying to figure out a plan how to make it work. How do I get around it? At one point, I really did. I considered going back to McDonald's. I said, I don't care what it takes. I will go back to McDonald's if I have to. If I can't find a job in the meantime, I will do that and apply for other jobs whilst that, because I've got to pay bills. if that means I got to work hard for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, or whatever, at McDonald's, and fried chips when I hate that job and I hate that I'm coming back here to this position, I will do it for the meantime. And do you know what? It's funny because it reminded, there was a guy that I was working at McDonald's when I was 18, and this guy was a grown ass man, 35, and he came into McDonald's and was like, blood. So I asked him, bro, why are you here? Like, bro, like, he said, bro, I had a business. I ran the business very well. And then something just happened and the business collapsed, lost everything, had to start from scratch. So now I'm here working at McDonald's trying to get a bit of money together, quick money, and I'm out. This guy was here for a month and left. He got his money. He worked hours upon hours, got his money, and went. And in my head, I was like, bro, why is this guy? I was like, but then when I was unemployed, that moment, he didn't have to say something. I just remember that moment that this guy said, I can go back to go forward. These are the things that as young men we need to be seeing, because sometimes what the young men are seeing, I hate to say it because adults will always be saying it, is they see a fast life. They see things, how to get things very easily. But even those who have got a lot of money, it takes a lot of hard work, to get to the positions that they're at the moment. Nothing comes that easy. Even if you're going to sell drugs, my friend, please, it's not easy. It takes hard work. You're putting a graft in, you're putting a shift in. You know what I mean? And so, I think those are also important things into that leadership aspect as well. When it comes to the young men in general, it's like, yo, cutting corners ain't going to get you to where you need to get to. You know what I mean? Cutting corners are not going to get where you need to get to. Hard work, talent, it's going to take you far places. You know what I mean? So combining the two is really important, and waiting for your time and waiting for your season. Those things are important, but those are things that have to be said to you, or you have to see it in order to understand it. And again, if men are not present in younger men's lives, if we're not talking about it, if we're not showcasing it, it can become very difficult for young people. You know what I mean? They need testimonies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think just good examples of what success looks like are important too. And I saw somebody in the comments that talked about mentorship and things like that, and I think that is so important because, just like you said, when you got in a bind, your next step was, okay, I'm going to have to do whatever I need to do to get money legally, right? Whereas someone else who doesn't have a good enough point of reference, they don't necessarily go the legal route, and then that's where their experience with the legal system just goes awry. And I think, when I think about my foundation, coupled with the things that I learned from my dad, then my grandfather also being there, and then my mom with being very staunch about me going to church and being very actively involved in our church. And at the time I look back at it and I'm like, oh my God, when my friends are home watching cartoons, I'm in church. I was like, I used to be so annoyed. I'm like, come on, I just want to stay home and watch the Smurfs, for crying out loud. But I think her idea was to keep me involved, keep me busy, keep me in front of people who are doing positive things. And I thank her today for it. In the time, I was like, oh, okay, I gotta get away, you know. But luckily, once I hit my teens, like when I was like the 15, 16 age, she was like, all right, you determine when you want to go. Everybody gets a point where they need to find their own relationship with God. You determine it. And then when I went to college, I was like, phew, bye. Freedom. Later.
Bye-bye.
But I had that foundation, which is the important part. And I had enough to know, like, okay, all right, so if I get to struggling, even during finals week, or I'm struggling in college with a class or with a situation, I pop on some gospel music, right? So it was always built in there, but I was still going to the club and partying on Saturday, but I still played the gospel music, right? On Sunday, I studied, got ready, and, it's always in there. And I think that part and that combining together And I still had, like, I had a gentleman that was like a stepdad to me, and he would come and check on me. He would come visit me while I was in college. Sean, you need anything? I have my uncle and his wife, they would come and visit me. And I just think, God, you don't think about these little things, but they are what tie you to who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you come from, other people will remind you or give you a new identity or give you something to gravitate to. But I always had that, ability, and other friends that I had similarly always knew who they were and what they weren't going to do, and what their boundaries were. And I just think when I look at some of the common thread, it's the love, it's having that mentorship. And when you don't have it, that's when manhood goes awry and people start to fill in the blanks. So we need more people involved, wrapping their hands around, especially our Black men, our Black young men, right? And you don't have to be a father. Like, I'm not a biological father, but I have stepkids, right? And although I'm not with my ex-wife anymore, I still talk to them. I still reach out, right? And I think that is so important. And I just remember a conversation that I had with my stepson recently. He was like, and you don't think they're watching. And this is why I say, you don't think they're watching. He was like, he said something. He was like, I just always admired the way you stood and who you were. And it's like, here he is now 20, 23 years old. And it's like, that just meant so much for me to hear him say that, right? And I think, like, you just don't know that little thing. Don't dismiss what you can do, whether it's the Big Brother, mentorship program, or, touching a family member that may not have a father or a good father, male figure in their life, or even if they do, still stepping in to show them the different types of leadership that are out there, the different types of executing manhood and what that looks like. Because ultimately, guess what? I don't have it all together. So there's some things he can pull from me, some things he can pull from his biological father, and other things, but at least as a point of reference. Because if it's always what somebody on the street or what your friend is doing, in a lot of instances, that's not going to be, the right way or good enough to get you through a challenge.
Bro, you're spitting facts, bro, right now. And I think, like we said it before, again, character is important first and foremost, because that will speak before we get to the room. Once we're in the room, what we are saying is important, but then what we're doing is even more important, because, like you just said, there's so many different lessons that young man was learning from you just by watching you, right? And it's so intriguing because I think even some of the lessons that we might even have ourselves, or some of the thought patterns or some of the behaviors we even have, are not things that our father has even said to us. It's things that we've observed from a very young age and that we've taken it on board without even thinking about it. You know what I mean? And when you start looking at yourself, you see some of the similarities between yourself and the father figure, which is why Jesus' words are so powerful when he says, I only do what the father is, I've seen the father do. I'm only doing what I've seen the father do. You know what I mean? I'm only speaking the words that the father has spoken. Like, he's letting us know there's a principle here. The son and the father, that's what the Bible lets us know, that we're conforming us to the image of the son. The more time you spend with that particular person, that ethos, that ideology, that principle, the more you become closer to that particular that goal that you're trying to hit. And kids are very much the exact same thing. And so this identity and leadership is key, because actually what we are seeing is that the power of a leader, the power of a man who has a voice. And you may not think that your voice is important. Maybe you're only influencing 5 people, you think, but those 5 people could be instrumental, because if those 5 people are solid and they speak the words that are powerful and encouraging, uplifting, and wise, there is 5 people that's lives that you've impacted. When they start talking to other people, they can speak to another 1 or 2 people, and that's 10, and even more than that. Do you know what I mean? So it can multiply so quickly before you realize you need not speak to a whole thousands of people to be a great influence. You only need to speak to one, because that one person can speak to two for you. You know what I mean? So it's that important situation again. And that's why, yeah, I think people have been saying that the power of mentors is so important. And I think a lot of times as well, I see in a generation, because I always say that men are accrue and attracted to power. Whenever the source of power for them is restricted or stopped, anger and frustration kicks in for a lot of young men. And that power, that ability to have status and wealth, sorry, I should say that ability to have power is oftentimes through finances. So when young men are seeing that they can access power through finances, that often becomes, no matter how I do it, I don't care, I just need to get it. And when they're not getting it, there's a frustration that kicks in, because that's what anger is. Anger is simply the ability. Anger is as a result of you not being of your goal not being able to be met and it being blocked. So you have frustration that seeps out, and so a lot of young men are in that space where they're frustrated. That's why we see so many people on red pill, that so many men are frustrated. And because what was happened is there's an incorrect form of teaching when it comes to power. Now, I'm not saying there isn't some right teaching on that side, but by the way, I'm just going to give you a little example to break down. But one of the things that I've noticed, even in myself and amongst us as guys sometimes as well, is, like, for instance, the argument, I was listening to this podcast, and the argument that the men were having was around obviously women, and talking about how about women and them giving away the box, the puswa, to other men easily, but they're having to work for it. And as I listened to the argument, what I heard was, you're crying about other men who have the ability to open up her without having to pay anything, without having to suffer anything. You want the same level of power that he has, but you ain't him. And so a lot of guys are seeing other people do certain stuff and are saying, why not me? But not realizing there's a journey to a particular place. There are different circumstances, different factors as to what position and what role you play in society and what you actually end up doing. So this for men, the biggest issue has always been about, how do I accrue power? How do I accrue power? And where do I get this power from? And so I think we've been talking about on this channel as well, effective leadership, effective communication. I got to show, not tell. I've got to, show that good leadership aspect, and people will follow. And so, because I was talking to the guys today, I want to put this across to them as well. Look, just because we're talking about the guys today, the ladies will have their turn another day. But just because we're talking about the guys today, if you're a man out there and you feel like these ladies, because I'm hearing an argument of American black women are this, black women are this. I'm like, listen, sir, I'm gonna need you first and foremost to be the man that you are looking for the woman to be. You know what I mean? Be that guy first, right? And you'll realize you have a lot to choose from. You won't be suffering, right? That's not to say there isn't people out here mad. I'm just saying, but you need to be that guy first and foremost, right? I remember in school, I was looking at the men and the boys in school, right? Because school is really interesting. People say school is not today, but school is today. Because the same things that happen in school are still happening today. That's why men are crying about it, right? Because it's the same thing that happened in school is happening right now. That's why they say 20% of men are having older women. That's what happened at school too. Okay, the same thing happened at school. What was happening at school is a dynamic for what life is happening with, especially for men, right? At school, certain men get the privilege of, I'm just talking about women now, have the access to women. One, because they're either good looking, they're the strongest boys in the year, they fight everybody, they don't mind punching people up. They're the bad boys of the school. Okay. They are the class clown. Yeah. All right. Or they're the sportsman. Yeah. I'm sure there's another category in there or whatever. Right. And those men, it didn't matter what they did, they always seem to have access to women. Now, you on the outside are looking and going, man, I wish I could be that. And actually, we see it in films. They do it in films all the time. They show you the nerdy guy, whatever, sees a cool jocks or whatever. He's got all the cool chicks, women, whatever, right? So what you see in school happens is there's a bunch of men who come into school or whatever in your year, whatever, and they have access to women. And you on the outside, like, why can't I get that? I want to have the same access to these women. Da, 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 da. And what you haven't done is sat down and observe what's happening. Because and this is where the frustration kicks in, and this is where you have to take your time as a man and observe the world that you're in. Because the same thing can be applied at school with those women, can be applied outside of life in work and in jobs with women, with money, with finance, with achieving something. Don't sit there and look at, oh my God, I can't look how easy they've got it. And then be thinking that's how it, like you'd be moaning and crying about it, like, oh my God, it should be me. Sir, there are a different set of circumstances some people are playing with in this environment. Okay, all right. Not everyone's born with a face like Boris Kojo. Okay, not everyone's born with a physique of Boris Kojo. Okay, like you look at your height. It's not even 6 foot. So you know already that you're born with a certain different circumstances. You have to learn, how do I attain in the right way? And this is where our voices, like myself and Sean and other men who are also should speak. And this is really one of the reasons why I found trouble with Kevin Samuels, because it made it almost as if we have to bash the women down to get these men to have power over them. It's like, no, you naturally are meant to have authority. I know the ladies might not like this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Okay. As a man, you come into this life. I believe the way that God has ordained us to be, men are meant to have authority, which means you have position as a leader. Therefore, if you exhibit the characteristics and you exhibit this correctly and you inhibit this correctly, you lead well, you lead in love, you lead with servitude. What should happen is you naturally get put into a place of authority, just like in a job. If you're it's just like in a job, the meritocracy is, if you do your job well and you are able to apply your skills in various ways to make good business for the company, you're going to be promoted. Now, of course, there can be some politics within that too. We all understand that. Don't get it twisted. But the majority of the time is, you do that well enough and you make money for the company, they're going to promote you. And if they don't want to promote you, you can take your services elsewhere and you can be valued elsewhere. So what am I trying to say to you is that part of this life, yeah, it's not you can see it, observe it, and see other people maybe winning faster than you. But the reality is, have you sat down and actually figured out what are they actually doing? What are they actually doing to get to that place? My final point is, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I sat down. I used to complain in my head, I'm like, these girls just be giving these guys all the play. Then I sat down and I spoke with some of these guys that were getting all the girls, and you'll realize it's not just because he's good looking. First of all, he's charismatic. First of all, he's confident. Okay, it's the way that he's able to speak, maneuver. Okay, he has no fear. Okay, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if he gets expelled today. Okay, you do. You know what I mean? Okay. And even the way he looks, the way he moves, there were different components to what made that person. So then you start to realize it's not just because of this. They do certain things, whether it's conscious or not conscious. And so you yourself have to go the same thing, apply the same thing in life. People are not where they are just because, oh my God, they've just been given them because of nepotism. Some people are, but the reality, a lot of people have worked to get to where they are. A lot of people have worked to get to where they are to even have nepotism. So, my friend, I need you to take a chill pill, observe the times, and actually see what's in front of you. Go for it, Sean. Sorry, I've been talking for time because.
No, you were hitting on some good points. I think the first thing that you mentioned when you talked about like who gets more options, right, in terms of men with women, and I think that's so true. Like, and I think we all at some point, unless we're that guy that's just always been, a natural sportsman and just kind of used to that in environment, it's just kind of come our way. But it's like the things that they have done have set them up for the success, right? Because if you are an athlete, you're trained, you have discipline, right? You get confidence from the wins, right? And then once you get to the high school varsity level, if you're at that level and playing sports in high school, that's because you've really developed over time and you're really good. So that means you're really good at that. You're used to winning, right? So when it comes to something that us other guys who may not necessarily have been sportsmen all throughout or what have you, they're not used to the rejection, or they're not used to how to spark the conversations or interacting with people on different levels and how to be adaptable, because those are all the things that sports do teach you, is the adaptability, learning your plays, knowing where to go, being focused, seeing something that looks difficult but ordering up the steps to make it happen. So I definitely can identify with that. And there was a time between like 16 and like probably like 19, 20, where I was just trying to like find myself and figure out, so how do I navigate with women, and who am I, right? And Black people, sometimes we get painted as one thing, but we're not a monolith. So for me, I was always somewhat preppy, and I would always get, especially in my latter years in high school, I would get Carlton, right? Which was cool because I also had a confidence in who I was. So I really didn't care, right? And it was, and I knew enough to like have friends. You need the friends that may fight your battle, right? Because listen, y'all know I don't want to get I bruise easy. So by the time high school came along, if I didn't have to, I wasn't trying to fight nobody. So it's like you need those friends on the football team. You need those friends that are, that'll have your back. So you had those friends, and then I had the friends, that would study, and the friends that, were in student government or whatever, so I was always like navigating and, still wanting to be known enough, but not like needing to be popular. So I think, and then it was like, then you get to college, and then it's like you're a little fish in a very small pond. So then it's like I had to find myself all over again and figure out who now I was going to be, how I'm going to take care of myself, and all these other things. So it's just, the journey of a man is very, very interesting, and it's very complex. And if you don't have things to look to, just like you were saying, Coach, like if you don't have things to look towards, and if you don't have somewhat of a framework and a foundation, you can kind of go any which way, and that's the danger. Because look, if we go the wrong way, there's bitter consequences, and the world has less pity on men, right? And it's not and I'm not looking for pity, but like if we do wrong, the consequences are grave, right? And I think like we just really need to be very conscious and careful of that as we are looking back at the next generation coming up. Whether they're our kids or not, we need to understand that. And then just like kind of fast forwarding into the manosphere, I think, listen, I think men of today, modern men, we found a voice, right? Some of the ladies want us to mute the voice, but we found a voice, right? And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's common barbershop talk, which is what happens in the manosphere a lot of times. But I think the missing link is what's next, right? Because are there some uniform things that we could sit and talk about that frustrate us with women, or the things that we think that women do, right? And the same for women that they see in men, right? But we can't just stop there. It can't just be like all women are, fill in the blanks, and then you stop there and it's like, okay, then I'm going to treat them accordingly. No, the answer is, how do you better find a woman that is more suited for you? How do you be the best version of yourself? Because at a certain level, and I don't think I don't want to sound arrogant, but I'm sure you could identify with this too. Like once you reach a certain level in your self-confidence, and then that self-confidence matches where your station in life, you don't have to do a whole lot of work, right? Do you need to be confident? Do you need to engage women in conversation? 100%. But you will have options. And the reasonable folks in the manosphere will say, don't hyper focus on women, hyper focus on yourself, and the women will come. Now, some of the stuff that some of the people may say, what you do with those women, now that can be left where it is, But I think like the crux of that is, if you just focus on you and you're not so like hyper focused on what do I need to do today to get women, then the women will be there. You will be in places where you can be in relationship with women, and I think the next steps is up to you. How do you govern yourself? How do you act? Are you a man of character? Now, if you're not, then that's going to give you some different options, and then you might find some stress in your situation, because I think nothing comes without stress. I don't care what nobody tells you, the F boy moving around crazy. There is a lot of stress to do that. And that's why I never had the stress. I was just always a straight shooter, always an honest person. And if it worked for you, it worked for you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Because I like to sleep at night. I don't like nobody running my phone. I don't like all that nonsense. It's too much for me. I don't have the wherewithal to be dealing with, who's gonna be around the corner. That for me is not, again, and it comes back to character. And I think, getting to the point, we need to teach our young men what character is and what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that, bro. Definitely with you. And I mean, to be honest, I think the situation at hand at the moment, like I said, is there's just so many things out there in terms of voices that are being spoken of, and faith cometh by hearing. So whatever you're hearing is becoming your faith, is becoming your belief system, is becoming your value system, which is why it's important to have good instruction. Do you know what's so powerful as well? And I probably need to even take it to myself. When I started 2 years ago, when I started the YouTube full time, I was listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad. I listened to it the first time and I was like, this is pretty good. Second time I listened to it, I was like, this is wild. It started making more sense, right? But it also started informing the way I was moving and making certain decisions. So whatever you're hearing is definitely going to influence what you're doing. Which is why we're saying that the voices that you're listening to are so powerful. If anything, for anybody's out there, for the men or for the women as well, especially if you're a single parent, this is key. Yeah, listen, you're not going to speak to that young man every single day. It's not going to happen. There's going to be days where he going to slip through the net because he's a boy, okay? But what you can do when you get them early is get them listening to stuff that's going to actually educate them, because it doesn't have to hit them now. It has to hit them. It just needs to make sure that it hits them a little bit later on, because boys and women too. This is the same for them as well. But boys and girls, they need time to be able to discover themselves in amongst that. And what they're looking for is to make certain choices, the ability to make certain choices and see how does it play out. Now, depending on that kid, some kids are more riskier than others. They like taking more risks than others. But most kids want to try and figure out their own path. And when they realize certain things don't work, they literally do come back to what they've been told and taught. And that's what's so key about it. So exposing them early to good teachings, whether that's Christianity, whether that's good books on business, whether that's books on psychology, whatever, get them in those spaces, man. Do you know what I mean? So that they can have that, to fall back on, you know. Um, because whatever you're hearing, you're making your value system, you know. And even for me, I think when I was even younger, and trying to discover who I was, because it's hard. You have identity crisis in terms of what nationality are you? Are you Ghanaian? Are you British? At some point, you just say, what, frick it, I'm neither. I'm both. I accept both. You know what I mean? You start to try and hold two truths at once. I think the most important things that I think are so powerful as well when you're young is that you're going to be trying to decipher the world through what you've seen versus what you've heard. And this is where the battles usually come in. And I think a lot of young people, the reason why they lose the battle to what they see in terms of, I'm coming at negativity, is because the voice on the other side isn't as strong. You know what I mean? That voice of, hey, these are the lessons I've taught you. These are lessons that I've embedded in you. It's not that strong, but the world's voice is so strong because you're being hit every single day, every single second, which is why I didn't like Black Panther. But that's another story.
Don't spoil it. I still haven't said it. I don't want to hear it. And you touched on something, right? The pull of the world is so strong, and I'm gonna give some credit to my mom again. Coach, I can't even tell you how many speaking things. It just didn't matter. Like when you had off on, we had Martin Luther King Day was a national holiday. I was in someplace, auditorium, school, somewhere doing something. And I remember several times I had to play Martin Luther King. And whenever it was time for me to do any type of speaking, anything, my mom always made me recite the lines over and over again. And then we had to break it down. And my mother, in her professional life, was a librarian, but in her church life was a Sunday school teacher, a superintendent. So the like studying of the word was like built in her. Oh my God. So we used to have to break down the speech and what it meant. Now imagine at like 9 to 10 years old, and I'm like, it's not the color of your skin, but the content of your character, right? But it's like you don't realize those things set in so much for me. So content of character always was important to me. And whenever I selected friends, even my dad, he said this to me one time, funny story. He was talking amongst his friends about me, but I was in the room. But you know how parents have a way of doing that, but it's not for you to interject. But he was like, I probably was in junior high school at this time. And he was like, yeah, Sean's a little bit bougie. All his friends, he said, all his friends,
even at that age,
they're all doing well in school. They're all this, that, and the third, because he doesn't hang out with anybody that's not about something. But he there was some pride in there, but like a little like jug to me too. But I laughed because it didn't register to me that I moved in that way until he said it. And he put language to it. But at the end, he was like, but I'm proud of him for it because I know that he's not going to put himself around people that are doing the wrong thing. And I think for me, I had, like, just like you said, you just soak up certain things and you just move in that way. But then when your parents can put language to it, it's like, oh, then this is something I want to continue to do because it's going to bode well for me, because the other, I had other friends that went in other directions and they weren't going down that path. So I think like it's so funny that those certain little nuggets set in and then they can set the whole trajectory of your life, right? Because even if I hadn't heard those affirmation words, or even if I hadn't been taught, about character, I wonder how my life would have been different, and I think it just goes to show, don't take those things for granted. Don't take those conversations, those moments, those things that you are pressing into your children or your loved ones for granted, because they are impactful and they can change the trajectory of a young child's, in this instance, a young man's life. Because it's very important. We all get to that critical stage where we can go path A, and it's somewhere about between junior high school and high school. You have a choice. Are you going to go down the route of, school, focusing in, being confident that it's okay to do whatever you need to do in school? Or are you going to try to impress and finagle your way along the way? So very important that you pay attention to kids at those age, especially your young men.
Bro, you ain't playing, man. And you know it's so funny as well, because I remember some of the lessons, some of the things that my dad has told me, that I was like, yeah, whatever. And then it comes up and you're like, snap, but he was right, and so those things are so powerful because, like I said, they are the voices that, like I said, come at the right time. So that's why positive reinforcement from any parent is vital to especially to young men as well. It is vital. And I'm not talking about, and ladies, I love you, but I'm not talking about babying young boys. I'm not talking about making them your little hubbies as well and making them your little please as well, ladies, please, can we stop this? Sorry, it just came to my mind. No offense, but can we stop twinning up with our little boys? Please stop it. I beg of you. I pray of you. Please stop it now. It's honestly, the young boys do not need to be going and twinning up with you. Okay, they do not need to be twinning up with you. They're not your little man like that. Okay, please. I know he looks cute for a photo. Let the man have his own style. Okay, all right. I've seen too many of those photos where a little boy is dressed up just like you. Like, baby, let him live. Because if we are there, this doesn't happen. I'll be honest with you. If men are present, this doesn't happen. We often don't do these kind of things. No offense to anybody else. Please don't take it personally. I'm not shooting anyone particularly. I'm just saying, I just remember it came to my head. I was like, yeah, stop that, please. Young boys don't need that. Okay. I know it looks cute in your head. Stop it. Okay. That's for you and your hubby, and that's it. But no, but yes, no. Importantly, like you were saying, but I remember some of the lessons, how critical they were. Because there was parts of me that were a little bit naughty. I'll be honest with you. There was parts of me that I remember in primary school. This is probably when I'm like 5 or 6. I remember I went into a toilet and listen, I peed on the seat, but I peed past the seat. And I don't know why I did it. I don't know what if I just remember I don't know what if I had a Kayla moment in that moment. I just didn't give a hoots at that point. I said, you know what? Frick it. I'm just gonna do it. Do you know what I mean? And so every kid has these moments. I'm saying every kid has these moments where, you know what I'm saying, you're gonna have a stupid moment. But like I said, what brings you back is the fact you've been taught better. You know what I mean? Because once I did it, I got told off. I was like, oh, this is just stupid. I don't know why I did that. It was a dumb moment. It was a super stupid moment. I still can't remember. I still don't understand what was going on in my head. It's one of those moments.
You did this at your house?
No, I did it in school.
Oh, in school.
When I was like 5 or 6. No, not my house. No. At the school.
Ready to say, if you did it at your house, you
No, that I wouldn't have lived long enough. I wouldn't have lived long enough to even see the days. My mom would have heard that you're passing part of, would have known. So yeah, no, I did that at school, and it's just stupid stuff I was doing. I did some stupid stuff at that point. But yeah, no, and so that training that you get was quintessential. Like you, bro, I was in church 3 or 4 times a week at the very beginning, and then we changed church, and then I wasn't at that point, but I think obviously this is really it was such a it's such an important thing. I remember like you said, a positive thing was, I remember my dad said to me, when I was like, probably like when I was about 18, 17, probably, he said to me, oh, you're gonna be a good father. And I said, how do you know? It was like, no, I watched you, the things that you do, the way you move, the way you listen. And I always remember that moment. You know what I mean? Like, I was standing in the kitchen when you were saying it. And that again, like you were saying, bro, it inspires you, but it sticks with you. These are key words that are being said, and a lot of boys don't have those moments. I think that's also because I remember when you were telling me, I was just inside. Outside, I was like really like I'm cool, like yeah, I hear what you're saying. But inside, I'm like, say more. I need to hear more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you want to hear more because, like you said, like, bro, when your dad's when your dad's able to show you off and say to friends, yeah, that's my son. He does this. Look, for every young man, it's an important moment, man. When you can hear your father saying, if he's proud or he loves what you do or he's appreciating you, I can see you're growing. I can see how you've done it. When a father is able to say those words about a son, the son really is empowered by those things. So when I see that young men don't have that, I can also understand why they're going off scale, because this world is about love. And so when you don't have that, it's so easy to go the opposite route, like you said, and you get to that stage of 13, 14, when that rebellious streak is now starting to rear its ugly head and it's asking you questions. You have
mute. Your mic is out. Yeah. So I'll just add to that. I think my issue, and I don't think this will be foreign to anybody that has watched this channel, is the fact that I had opinions, and I thought I could teach my life lessons to folks, including my parents, at a very early age. Well, listen, I quickly learned that with my father, that wasn't gonna fly so much. Yeah, that's the moment when I listen, he was wrong about, it's like, you could be right, but you could be wrong. He was wrong about what he was trying to discipline me on, but he was right in that the way I was going about it wasn't working, So he was like, listen, let me remind you who I am. I know I told you I don't believe in physical, discipline, but you're gonna get this fist in your chest real quick. He's like, not too heavy, but just enough to get your 14-year-old attention. It's like, come on. And I think, but you need that because it reminded me of who I was. Because some of these young men out here don't know who they are, and they don't understand a hierarchy and a pecking order and how to exist. And you need every young man in that critical stage. And I'm blessed and fortunate that I got it from my dad, because mothers can do it, but it's different. You need it from your father, because it's it's going nowhere. And I don't care how big I got or how whatever, it wasn't going anywhere. And I knew enough to know that I never wanted to buck up against him again. And that's it. You need that, and that's it. And I think, and again, I'll say that I love the fact that he always told me, he was like, I hated spankings as a kid because I felt like it didn't teach me anything. So that's why I don't want to do it to you. But I would rather, because my mom would still spank me sometimes. So when I was with her, she would spank me sometimes. But sometimes I'd be like, I just want the spanking, because with my dad, it's a talk, it's a conversation, it's a what did you walk away with? What did you learn? But then fast forward to today, like, what do we do on this channel? What serves us in our life so well? It's figuring out the root cause of things and why things are the way that they are. So as much as it was torture then, and I used to hate it, because sometimes he would get so mad, he'd be like, you're going to write an essay. I'm like, bro, you in this essay, come on. Come on with the essay. But, it teaches you how to be thoughtful. And I think we're missing that. And this generation doesn't think, they're very reactive. Very reactive. Somebody upsets me, I react. Somebody does something I don't like, I react. It doesn't matter if I love them. It doesn't matter if they're a family member or a stranger on the street, I react. You have something I want, I react. And that's what needs to change. That's what needs to, we need to do more explaining, more conversations, be more intentional. Like, I love to see parents being intentional. I know we follow DeVale Ellis, right? Him and his wife, and what they do with their 4 boys. I love it because he's very intentional. If his son is upset or he's crying, okay, get the tears out. Now let's talk through it. What's the problem? What's the issue? The tears are fine. You can cry them, but we got to figure out the issue. And I think more parents need to be intentional, even more so now with some of the issues that our kids are facing, some of the things they have access to, which is much, much more than we ever had. There needs to be intentional lessons at home.
I definitely hear that as well, bro. Definitely hear that as well. Funny enough, for me, the beatings actually worked for me. It didn't take long before I learned the trick. See, and I think that's I won't say that's necessarily the way to go. I'll say I think that's a bit of luck as well, because I think the kind of kid I was I like to learn. So you know what? If I see a pattern, I'm gonna try and be like, okay, if that pattern equals X, Y, Z, I ain't gonna do X, Y, Z, because I'm not gonna get beat again. So I remember I think it was probably about 9 or 10. I remember I was playing my N64 at the time, and it just hit me, bam, bro. If you don't do this, you don't get beaten. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing anymore. I'm not doing these things again. Yeah, I'm not getting beaten, right? And that was my way. I learned from then. I'm not gonna do it. I found other ways. I started, the little sly little talkbacks. But yeah, the overt stuff, I wasn't doing it no more because I'm not getting beaten. But I learned how to get a little bit cheeky with the little drawbacks, say a little sarcastic comment, or, say a little side. And that was my way of kind of like fighting back. But, as a kid, you learn your different ways. And, like I said, I think it's important. There are conversations that need to be had with kids in terms of what's going on, what's happening. Beating is not going to work at this point. I remember there was a point where Dad said, "Listen, there's no point beating you because it's not gonna do anything. We have to talk about it. And or you get the little, you're only doing yourself because soon I won't be here. You'll be by yourself. Then you'll know." And that guilt trip there, fam, you're just like, oh my days. Like, yeah, you get those things. You know what I mean? So, there are times where you have those moments. So like I said, those words, those moments are impeccably important, and it forms our identity, and that also, like I said, it informs our leadership as well. I want to also explain, I want to talk, and that's why this channel is here. So like, we show and we don't tell. We want to be able to show people, hey, we can have great conversations, we can discuss, we can debate, we can say, we disagree, and it doesn't have to be a fight, doesn't have to be a knocking on the head, doesn't have to be you know crazy moments, so we can still have those good discussions. And again, just like we've had on this channel, when things go wrong, we can problem solve. We can say, hey, that didn't work, why didn't it work, how do we move forward, how do we maneuver the boat forward, and keep the momentum going. And that's all part of the leadership aspect. So yeah, it's critical, man. I won't lie to you, man. But those are good days, man, when you're younger, and you get those words of wisdoms, those pearls, because they stick with you.
Bro, I miss those days because adulting, bro.
It's mad out here.
And your parents, they always just say, you're gonna appreciate it. When you're
Hmm.
on your own and you have to pay your bills, you think you grown now. They be like, you think you grown, but you don't know grown. And it's like, they were so right, because if I could go back to
Not paying bills.
not paying bills, hell, I'll take going back to college. Shoot, because it's like it's a hybrid, because oh my gosh, taking care of yourself and figuring things out, it just it's like it's for the birds. But what I will say is, back to leadership, I remember another time with my grandfather, and he was tough love. Like my father was more of a balance, but my mother's father was more of like tough love until I got to be an adult. And I was blessed to have my granddad until he was 92, so I had him well into adulthood. And his he was such tough love, and sometimes I would get so frustrated with him, and I would get upset because I felt like he treated me different. I was the first grandchild, and then there weren't other grandchildren on my mother's side until like 15 years later. And I just watched him spoil my other cousins that came after me in a very different way, and I used to get upset about it. But I just remember one time I had come to him in my 20s, and I was just out of college, and I don't know what the hell I had done. Something happened with my car, and I got a bunch of tickets being irresponsible, and they were about to tow my car. And I was like, Papa, I need this money. Da, 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 da. And he was like, don't you have a job? I said, yeah, but I just need it now until, da, da, da. He was like, figure it out. I was like, huh? I was like, what? But it taught me a lesson, because there was a couple of critical times where he made me figure it out. Right. Now when it came to like college, he was very instrumental in my college education. I could be, I'm very thankful for that. But certain little stupid things, like when you're late teens, early 20s, still trying to get on your feet, he was like, no. And I would be so upset. But I tell you, and I said this at his funeral, I said the figure it out made me to be the person I am today, because it taught me that I can figure it out. And figuring out doesn't mean that I need somebody else to do it. I can do it myself. And that's the lesson that he was trying to teach me, is as a man, and I watched him live his life this way. He was his own man and did things and provided for his family and in generations, but it's because he figured it out. And that's, in his rough way, what he was trying to push me to do. And it's what I needed, because remember, I'm an only child, right? So only children can get very coddled, very spoiled very quickly. And I know my mom, and especially losing my dad at a young age, people can step in and want to do things for you to fill in the blanks, to try to overcompensate for what they feel like you're missing. And there were voids, I'm not going to lie, but his love was, I know you can do it. I know you can figure it out, and I'm not going to do it for you. And that's the lessons, that sometimes just because we can doesn't mean we should. And we still need to teach our young men lessons. We need to teach our young men how to figure things out for themselves. Because if the answer is always going to someone else and not within yourself, then you really ultimately don't believe in you, right? And just like you, when you lost your job, you had to figure it out for yourself, and your plan was on you. You banked on yourself. You bet on yourself. But if you didn't have that inner confidence to believe in that, then you might have done something else that wasn't aligned with where you were supposed to be today. And I think that part is what we forget, and what we often don't impart into young men. Because technically, right, if we believe from a Christian perspective, right, we should have the vision. But if our vision is always directing us to someone else, then we don't really have the vision. It's not ours. And we're not truly leaders. And I think often what happens, and you look at it in the extremes, people are looking to somebody else. As much as I used to listen to Kevin Samuels a lot, right? I still was Sean, and I wasn't going to let Kevin Samuels lead my life, right? Did I think there was some things that he said that might have had value? Absolutely. But I'm not going to follow him, right? I'm not going to say everything he says is Bible, because no man is Bible. I'm not Bible. I don't have it all together. So I think our young men and men in general, that's manhood. What are you figuring out? What is your plan? What are you doing for yourself? What is it based on? And how are you lining up your steps?
Yeah, bro. Key words there as well, man. I think it's for any lady out there too. Uh, you know, be careful what you choose out here. And man, then please, if you know you're not ready for these youths, strap the freaking up, please. I need you to, okay? Because it's getting insane out there. All right, and before we have to start blaming each person, listen, everybody needs to take accountability for themselves. Man, then wrap it up, ladies. Vet, okay, all right. I don't want to hear no more excuse about man them lie. Listen, I know they do. Okay, all right, but before we start having kids, which is a really big thing, let's start wrapping something on the end of it. Okay, man them put something on the end of it, please. I beg you, because it's causing generational ripples. You know what I mean? Like me and Sean are having a great conversation right now. We had our fathers in our lives, and those impacts can be felt to this day, which is why we're sitting here having this conversation right now, because the impact of those conversations, have led us to this particular moment right now where we're having this discussion. So, for anybody out there, everybody has to take accountability now for their actions and be aware of what they're choosing to do, because it's a choice. It's not a I fell into it. It's a choice in most people's cases. So, yeah, no, definitely. Um, definitely this conversation is definitely needed for any young men out there as well. Look for, if you haven't got a father figure, look for a mentor. You know what I mean? Or ask any person that's, even in school, you can ask for mentors. You know what I mean? People that can properly mentor you correctly. And give you at least something to have as a base, a foundation, a starting block. Look at inspirational people in our media front, people that are businessmen, people that are actually doing things with their life on a constructive level. Look for them. Ladies do it all the time. I'll be honest with you, ladies do it all the time. They would tell you straight, they would get a mentor. So and so CFO, CEO is their mentor. Do you know what I mean? Like, yo, and us men do it too. No, don't get it twisted, men do it too. I'm just saying, like, grab yourself a mentor. If you haven't got that father figure or that older brother or whatever, grab yourself a mentor, man. It never hurts to have that person in your space, just to help you kind of figure out some stuff, even if it's just a voice of some of your thoughts. Because as a young man, you're going through a lot, you're experiencing a lot, you're hearing a lot, you're seeing a lot. And sometimes you just need, your parents, as much as they may be cool, they ain't your age group. And so saying certain things might not be the place you want to say those things to the people you want to say those things to. So sometimes you need that person on that particular level who can actually speak to you as well. Go for it, Sean.
Yeah, I definitely think that mentorship is strong, and I see it even in work. Um, there's so many women focus groups around that, and women do a good job of supporting each other around a cause. So yeah, no, I think that's so true, and more of us men need to do that, right? And I think it can be formal or informal, and I just think it's so important that we just really be more intentional. And I think that's the thing, and it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. And I don't think kids expect you to be perfect. Actually, I think they learn more from the imperfections. Like I learned more from the mistakes that my dad shared with me, the mistakes that my mom shared with me about things that she did, and things that they learned. I think there was more in that because it made them human, it made them real. And I could identify with that more than somebody telling me do what I say and not, do what I say and not what I do. So I think that's so important. It's like if you got to step up to the plate too. Like for men, it's not just about just like I shared stories with my stepson, right? And it's not that, and for me, sometimes we are um our worst critics. And when he said that to me the other day, it just was like, wow, because my stepdaughter said this a same thing similar to me a while ago. But I had beat myself up because she saw moments when my ex-wife and I argued, right? She heard me say things that weren't so nice and disrespectful, right? But she didn't hold that against me because she saw other parts of me. And I think that wasn't the totality of who I was. And obviously those moments were infrequent, but they were enough where I was like, oh my God, I feel so bad. And I would always, even after the divorce, I'm like, sorry, you saw the argument. Sorry, you were part of those. I really do apologize. And at the end of the day, I saw something somewhere. I don't know if it was in this chat or another. It's like normalize apologizing to your children. So I think that's another for parents. Don't be afraid to apologize to your kids. Because again, they are learning from you. And if you feel like you can never apologize, you're gonna walk around, you're gonna have kids that feel like there's no accountability. They don't know what an apology looks like. And those are the same kids that are gonna say, I'm sorry you feel that way. So apologize to your kids, be upfront with your kids. I think those are big lessons, and things that I took away. And not that my parents did a whole lot of apology. I don't want to paint a picture, a rose-colored picture. They didn't do a whole lot of apologizing, but there were moments when we had real conversations, right? And moments when they said, okay, I realized I did that and I didn't mean to, right? So I think it is okay, and it should be an active part, about that. And I'll end where I began. Is like my stepdaughter and my stepson, they took away the things that meant the most, and that's how they see you. And sometimes we beat ourselves up for the moments that were not right, the moments that we're wrong, or for the fathers or the people that aren't in their loved ones' lives as they should be, right? You beat yourself up, and that shame keeps you out of your child's life. But don't let that do it, because I think you have an ability to bridge the gap. You can always repair. You can always, the human capacity to forgive is very great, but the longer you keep that gap going, the longer and the more painful it is. So I think, like some fathers too, and as men, we internalize too often, right? Which is why sometimes we get up here on these platforms and bump our gums too much, because there's so much pent up that we just want to spill it. But we internalize it, and then it keeps us away. We even saw that with Devin, right? From Ready to Love. He had internalized what kept him away from his son for so long that it just kept him away. No, don't. You have to, because no matter how of a little of an impact you think you have, trust me, you can have a bigger impact in their life. And you can always come back. You can apologize and you can try. The trying is better than nothing, always, so that's my little speech, my little PSA.
No, it's good PSA still, and I think the apology one is such a big thing. Please, I think someone also put in the chat as well that I think it was Chris Nuffer that put this in the chat as well about letting boys just kind of problem solve as well. And that's why I said that it's so powerful. When you have father figures in the home, because they often are able to be that buffer. Because sometimes mothers do what mothers do. They mother. That's just the reality of it. It's not that they're trying to be bad, but they're mothering. So, and sometimes for us young men, we don't need as much cotton wool around us because we need to be able to, bump a knee, scrape our leg. We need to be able to hit a couple walls. Sometimes we need to bump our head against things, and be able to say, "Hey, okay, I didn't die. I'm gonna keep moving forward," because life for us is so much more different than it is for women. There's a necessity of those growth moments where a young man is allowed the ability to make certain mistakes and do certain things because he needs to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. He hasn't got the privilege of being pretty and getting married. Just saying, ladies. Not saying I'm not shooting at you, ladies. I'm kind of just giving a very obvious difference between us two. He will be judged on what he produces. Simple as. So if you don't allow him to discover a bit of himself and actually bump up against certain things and allow him to explore. It's very hard because, like I said, women, a mother is going to do what a mother is going to do. And this is why fathers need to be in the homes, because oftentimes they understand that journey. They understand that manhood journey where a young man needs to have time and space to go out and do what he needs to do. And I'm not talking about sowing royal oats. I'm talking about in terms of just going out and just exploring the world around him. And sometimes that doesn't always come out in the most positive way. And I'm not talking about anything sexual. I'm talking about just in terms of, you know, exploring the world, for what it is. And it's hard. So again, this is why we're saying father figures need to be in the home. Fathers need to be in the home. Fathers need to be present. Fathers need to be about that life, because these young boys are in need of that buffer too when they're in the home. You understand what it takes, that journey it's going to be. You understand how it's like. You understand what we go through as young men when we're trying to discover ourselves. And so your presence is felt. It's needed. So much so it's needed. So yeah, it's a big thing, and yeah, man, it's potent, and it's important as well, man. I think that's what I would like to say. So any young man watching this, any of the guys watching this, I'm saying, look, when you talk about good leadership, my friend, well, I'll say this first and foremost: good leadership, problem solve. First of all, lead yourself. You are your first domain. You are your first kingdom. Lead yourself. Develop your character. Okay, these are very, very important. As we heard earlier on, characters preceding us. Develop that. You know what I mean? And lead with your actions, not just with your words. That's all important as well. Build yourself up. Build yourself up. Go out there, do what you got supposed to do. Go and achieve what you're supposed to achieve. Go and build what you're supposed to build. We might not build houses today, but we do build our careers and our reputations now. So we build other things. We don't build homes directly now, but we do build other things. And so you're having to lead in those areas. So before you start complaining about the world and complaining about the matrix and complaining about the system and complaining about all those different things that could be preventing you from achieving, first and foremost, look at, what am I producing? What am I doing? You know what I mean? What can I be doing better and effectively to help myself grow in this area? Alternatively, same thing said for when you're dealing with women too. They'll just sit there crying on my laptop, on your computer, about women that don't choose you, because it's really, really feminine energy. I'm just gonna be real with you, okay? All right. Now, you don't be doing that. All right. What you need to do is get yourself, is first and foremost focus on you. Make sure that you are up to par. Make sure you're up to standard. And that doesn't mean finances. It means with self first. Discover who you are. Do you even know what you need? You're out, you wanted a woman to be in your presence, but do you actually know what you need? You're gonna go out there like Adam, going through all the different animals, not knowing which one you need. It's not, my friend. You don't get that luxury, my friend. Figure out what you need first. Sit with self first. If you need to heal, heal. Sit on the bench and heal. You know what I mean? And make your life that much more easier. All right. That was my kind of final thoughts. What's yours, Sean? I know you like to give us a little Benedicto.
Yeah, I think one of the critical lessons is to be self accountable. I think before you can hold anybody else accountable, you got to hold yourself accountable. You got to look in that mirror and face some of the ugly things about yourself, right? And do you know what your flaws are, right? Because I think that's where leadership starts, right? It's being able to assess, and the best person to assess is you, really, not somebody else, because that's easy. The difficult work, the work of a true leader, is to know yourself. Then you know somebody else, right? And I think the other aspect of it is you lead everybody different, right? So if you're leading a team, a group, you're leading your family. If you have children, they are all different. You cannot talk to, lead, manage a group of people all the same way. It's going to run you into a brick wall, because what works for me, as much as Kojo and I are similar and aligned on a lot of things, what's going to work for me is not what necessarily is going to work for him in every situation, right? Some situations, yeah, I might get it. You can say the same thing to us, but others, you need to individualize it. So I think that's the most important part. And when you're in a relationship, you need to be able to articulate it. Just like you said, Coach, knowing yourself is going to help you to know what you need and what you want. And it can't be feminine, fit, and friendly, right? That's cute. It says it's a cute catchphrase. I get it. But what's underneath that, right? Like, what does that mean? And what are you bringing to a relationship that's going to be of value, right? And I think so. Before we get on anybody's talking points, and again, anybody that may watch this that's from the Manosphere or other channels, it's not a dig at you, but you have to get below the surface, because if all we stay is at the surface, it's going nowhere, right? It's going nowhere. We're going to have the same fights because the women are going to just throw things back at us, and it's just going to be ping pong. You have to get below the surface. You have to get to know yourself. You have to get to know what you want. You need to have figured it out, right? I told you that life lesson about what my grandfather told me on several instances, right? Figure it out. Right? You have to have figured some things out for yourself. You have to have developed a plan for yourself, right? You have to be confident in yourself, right? Whomever you are, be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. I'm Sean. I can't be Kojo. And I got to be comfortable in who Sean is, right? And it's going to be for some people. Some will, some won't. So what? Someone else is waiting. I shared that with you before, Coach. And that's how we have to lead our lives, right? We're too fixated on getting everybody's approval. That's not leadership, and it's not manhood, right? There's going to be some people that hear this that can align with it and agree, and there's some people that are just it's not going to resonate with them, and I'm okay with that. And you need to be okay with whomever you are, right? And the character piece, I think that's 100%. When you can look in the mirror and say, my goal is to do the right thing the majority of the time, you're never going to fail. You know what I mean? Like, you will mess up, you will make mistakes, but if your goal is to do the right thing, you're gonna, if you are comfortable in making good decisions, you're going to be successful. And I think lastly, I learned this as a youth leader. We were in a revival. And I think it stuck with me like the last 15 years. And it's in life, there's no winners or losers. They're just choosers. We have a choice. You wake up today, you have a choice on how you want to manage your day. You have a choice on how you're going to deal with the people that are in your life. You have a choice on the decisions that you're going to make. So there's no winners and losers. No one's better than anybody else. We just make different choices. And I think let's focus on making better choices when it comes to what manhood looks like. Let's focus on making better choices about being better leaders, being better examples to the men that are in our communities, the young men that are coming up along the way. And that's it.
Strong. Get me strong. Whew, Chile, it's been a good conversation today, man. It's been a good conversation. I think it's been a sensible discussion. It's been good to discuss some of these important things that are happening to young men today as well, in terms of the trajectory that they're facing as well. So again, we pray that any young men who will watch this replay or watch parts of this video, whatever, we hope that you guys listen to this and take some gems from it. and let you guys know, listen, look, there are good men out there to be mentored by and to be shown the ways of the world, you know what I mean, rather than going to certain places where it's power grabbing but not teaching you the essence of how to live in harmony with other people. We're not here to rob people of their strength and their power. We're here to live harmoniously. And listen, good stewardship of your role, good stewardship of what you put out, good stewardship of how you look after others is always returned back to you, man. You know what I mean? So what you sowing into that ground is what's being returned back to you. Trust me. With human beings, most times when you sow it so well, these human beings they'll reap rewards of this, and it might not necessarily be money, but it's the love of the people. You know, it's the appreciation of the people. It's support. It's encouragement. So sow in some good people, man. You know what I mean? Especially young men. Okay, sow in some good people. We appreciate the musicians that you might be following, but listen, get someone a bit closer. You know what I mean? No one's saying musicians are bad. I'm saying get someone a little bit closer. You know, someone that can, really oversee and help. But yeah, listen, it's been a good conversation. This was a men's panel, talking about lack of identity and leadership amongst the men in this generation. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'll be back in the new year, 2023, because this is the last one before I go to Ghana. Now I may do some lives. I'll probably end up will. You know me. I'll probably end up will. Do some lives in 2023, but 2022. Sorry, whilst I'm in Ghana. But this is potentially the last live we'll be doing until then. So look, like, share, subscribe. We'll have a Tuesday panel. I need to think of a topic. I'm not sure what yet the topic will be, but we'll get you a topic indeed. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Click on the bell button for notification of uploads, guys. We appreciate you. Stay locked and stay loaded. We'll see you again very soon.